Ito ang Oragon Internet Television. Maaasahan sa balanced news in public affairs, education, music and information gamit ang mga bagong teknolohiya sa pamamahayag. Maaasahan sa katotohanan, kaagapay ng mamamayan sa pagkikipag-ugnayan sa pamahalaan. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting.
Dali lang, boy.
Hello, Tito Melo. Can you hear me?
Risa, yes. We're starting already, Rish. We are about to start.
Thank you. I'm using data. Okay.
Magandang umaga po mga kaibigan. Sa isa na namang edisyon ng ating Roundtable with PPI, pag-uusapan pa rin natin bilang follow-through ang paghahanda para sa nalalapit na halalan. Ito bang halalang ito ay makabuluhan? Yung bang paghahanda ay makabuluhan din? This is a follow-through of our earlier presentation last month. But to start the ball rolling, so to speak, kasama rin natin ngayong umaga, siyempre pa, si Ariel Sibildino, mula po naman sa Philippine Press Institute. Ariel, please go ahead.
Hindi ko na unmute. Okay, minute pala ako ni Kuya Melo. Okay, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Sa atin lahat at wherever you are, hope you're all safe. And shout out po sa lahat ng nanonood sa atin via FB live streaming. As Kuya Melo said, this is the last episode for the year, our year-ender, a part 2 of the first episode on the elections. I just shared to you, but before that, we thank very much Hans Heidel Foundation for supporting this landmark project of PPI, which actually started 5 months ago. This is the 6th and last month for this year. And hopefully next year, we are going to kick off with a topic that's very interesting as well in January 2021. Malugod kong i-share sa inyo just a few points raised, very good points raised during the last episode on the same topic. Number one, these were raised by the resource persons themselves and from the audience as well. Push for the implementation of the anti-dynasty law to address the playing on both sides kind of approach by the media. There is a need to come up with a partnership between COMELEC and social media influencers, as well as media organizations, not only PPI, but other orgs as well, that are apolitical in nature and will not be beholden to commerce, advertiser, etc., and other factors as well. A strong party system must be in place. Training programs for the media on how they play the role in on their coverage of the elections. There's another point. In terms of voters' education, we need to focus on whom we voted for, the governance we received or deserved. Push for COMELEC's proposal on campaign finance reform, where individual candidates will have less reason to scrounge for money, possibly cutting down on corrupt practices, and at the same time, ensuring the level the playing field for everyone. Make the electoral system more accessible. Second to the last point, measures must be done to control premature campaigning. And the last one, there is a need to come up with satellite registration to increase the number of registrants, because that came out na wala from Director Menes himself. who told us na talagang medyo mahinang turnout ng sa registration. So yun, we thank very much again all of you for attending this year-ender, and hopefully we are going to be excited again for this particular topic. And having mentioned about Hassan Father Foundation, I would like to introduce to you the very good friend of ours at PPA and a lot of the media practitioners since we began partnering with them 2 years ago on federalism. He is the resident representative of Hansel Foundation to the Philippines. Please welcome Attorney Guts Heineke.
Thank you very much, Ariel. Magandang umaga. Good morning as well from my side. That's all my Tagalog, so I have to switch to English now. Yes, my name is Guts Heineke. I'm the resident representative of the German Hans Seidel Foundation. The Hans Seidel Foundation is a German NGO. We are for more than 40 years here in the Philippines, and it's our goal to build up democracy and good governance. For that reason, the Hans Seidel Foundation is in the Philippines and even worldwide supporting civic journalism, because journalists, well-educated, well-informed, well-trained journalists, an essential key player for peace and development, because journalists are in charge in order to inform the citizen, the whole population about what's going on. Thank you very much, Ariel, as well for our wonderful partnership that we had during the last 2 years. Today is our last joint activity for this year, but I can announce already that we will continue next year. We will even have more activities. We will continue with the COVID Chronicles. We will start election chronicles. Of course, we will continue with this wonderful roundtable discussions. When you just look now for the participants 14, it seems a little bit, not so much, but we know that we have a lot of participants in Facebook, because it's less expensive watching from Facebook than being in Zoom. That's probably one reason, and it's more relaxed when you are in Facebook. Nobody can see you though, so we have usually in Facebook I think around 300 to 500 participants.
Yeah, normally.
So we are seen everywhere. So this program is really a success. We had 5 roundtables so far, the 6th for this year. All were good, all were nice, interesting topics. I learned a lot as a foreigner here in the Philippines, and we will continue that. Besides that, we all hope, I think, that we will have some real activities next year, like seminars, but that depends on the COVID-19 developments. Let's hope the best. So in order to close my little opening remarks, thank you very much, PPI. Thank you very much to all of you watching us, participating. Merry Christmas, and I wish us all a much better New Year 2021. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, Guts.
All right, thank you, and of course, we will end the year with another serious discussion. Ano ba ang magaganap? Ano ba ang kailangan gawin? Ano ba ang mga problemang nahaharap natin ngayon? Dahilan sa nakatanggap ako ng larawan mula kay June Dantes tungkol sa mga politiko sa Bicol, mga Villafuerte na naman ito, na namimigay ng face shield. Pero yung mga face shield magkakatabi at iba-iba ang pangalan pero iisa ang apelyido. So sabi ni General June Marquez na alala niya in 1993, nagkaroon ng isang sakuna doon sa Bicol, isang Air Force C-130 ang bumagsak at lahat namatay. I recall that because I was there at the airport waiting for the C-130 na walang dumating, only to find out it crashed. Sabi ni General Marquez, sunod-sunod kasing bagyo ang tumama sa Bicol at that time. Binaha ang Camarines Sur. Sabi ko, nothing has changed. Floods remain and the Villafuertes are still there. Anyway, tuloy tayo sa ating talakayan. Let me introduce our guests today. We're joined by Dean Ronald Ju Mendoza of the Ateneo School of Government. Meron silang ginawang pagsusuri tungkol sa political dynasties. We're also joined by Dr. Edna Ko. Siya po'y professor sa larangan ng public administration At siya po ang director ng extension program ng University of the Philippines sa gitnang Luzon. At dati po siyang dekana ng NCPAG. Kasama rin natin si Attorney Rona Ann Caritos. Siya pong Executive Director ng Legal Network for Truthful Elections o yung LENTE. Pag naiba yung pronunciation, medyo iba rin. At
Kaya
siyempre,
dahan-dahan tayo, Sir Melo.
okay, si Ginoong Jerry Lirio. Siya po ay isang Marshall McLuhan Fellow in 2006 at siya po ay isang Jaime V. Ongpin Awardee for Journalism. Siya po yung nagbunyag ng Hello Garci. At the same time, siya rin yung nagbunyag noong 1995 dagdag bawas sa senatorial elections. Okay? Inaasahan natin makakasama rin si Ginoong Vergel Santos. Baka nagte-tennis pa at nagpapapawis to keep himself fit. So let's start. Siguro, papakinggan natin si Ginoong Ronald Mendoza, si Dean Ronald Mendoza. Ano ba yung kanyang ginawang pagsusuri? Well, you may also share some slides if you wish. May kinalaman ito sa political dynasties. Welcome aboard, Dr. Mendoza, and thank you for taking our invitation. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Melo. Salamat sa ating mga kaibigan nandito. Sorry I'm a little late. I came from another Zoom meeting. I think the new normal is we have even more meetings than we used to have physically before. But it is a very enriching environment to catch up, and I thank Melo and the PPI for the kind invitation to contribute. I have a slide deck, but I think I'll spare us from that punishment and just give an informal sense of what the research is about. It's really about looking at the patterns of leadership in our country. Not necessarily just about the first study that, so right now, and it is the largest political leadership data set of the Philippines. And it now spans somewhere over 15 years of leadership data. And of course, our leadership is dominated by political clans. I don't think we ever had a sense of the exact domination, the exact number, until we put together that data set. And it started in AIM, we migrated it to Ateneo, and right now, we have figures that describe Congress, the municipalities, the provinces, and the figures are quite stark. Almost 80% of Congress are fat dynastic. In the provinces, except for a few governors, everyone is belonging to a fat political clan. And when we say fat political clan, this is one of our innovations. We try to distinguish the thin dynasty, yung payat na dynasty na nagsusunod-sunod lang, from the fat dynasty, yung nagsasabay-sabay. At in-explain ko na nga dati ito sa isang event ni Melo, yung fat dynasty talaga yung main concern natin because the governance implications of simultaneously occupying office. The checks and balances of our government tend to fail. And you tend to have a concentration of power, not unlike under a martial law type situation where everything is concentrated to a particular political clan, right? So hindi nga siya nasa Malacanang. Ito nga yung comment nung isa nating kaibigan, si Alex Lacson. Sabi niya, we kicked out a dictator in 1986. We kicked out a dynasty in Malacanang in 1986, but we ended up with many dictatorships in the countryside. Dumami sila, lumago sila sa countryside. What is the implication? And I'll round up my contribution with these thoughts. With more dynasties, this is our study, you have greater underdevelopment as a result. And we showed this through an empirical analysis which we published in a peer-reviewed journal article na hindi lang siya correlation kasi sinasabi ng ibang dynasty Di naman namin kasalanan na maraming mahirap na gusto kaming iboto. As you have more and more dynasties, you have less and less development. That's number one. Number two, there is a tendency in our democracy right now. In fact, we've been calling it democracy. There's a lot of noise. There's an difficulty to push consistent reforms. There is a personalistic nature to public management and policy reform. Kung ano yung pakilasa nung pinuno, dun matutulak yung reforma. Instead of building solid reform advocacies that continue over time based in political parties, we don't necessarily have this in the country. So every presidential election, we end up basically trying to guess what the policy reforms will be, what priorities will be, right? So our institutions and our processes do not necessarily allow us to sharpen our selection of these leaders because it's all very personality based. And the leadership and management, when they do occupy power, also becomes like this. And you add fuel to this fire, which is populism, and also the disinformation and fake news that characterizes, I think, the last decade. And you have even more noise in our democracy, which again we have been calling it a democracy. So I think these are the main concerns that we have and the study that we generated. Our hope is that by building coalitions and increasing citizens' participation in the political process, yan na nga yung mga reform na tinutulak ng mga grupo katulad nung kay Attorney Ona, yung Lente, NAMFREL is another one, PPCRV is another one. We hope that we contribute to voter education, but also we help sharpen our leadership selection, because otherwise, if we cannot hold our leaders accountable through these processes, in terms of governance and in terms of the type of political concentration that we see. I leave it at that. I know my colleagues in the panel probably have, including Dean Edna, will probably have additional things to say on these topics. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mendoza. We're joined by Vergel Santos. I'll be asking him a little bit later. Dr. Edna ko, ano po ang nakikita ninyo sa sitwasyon ngayon? How can there be efficient public administration when we are bound with political dynasties? Good morning.
Good morning, Tito Mel. May I call you Tito Mel? And good morning, everyone, my colleagues in the panel, and thank you to Mr. Heineke for inviting, for supporting this roundtable discussion. I will always respect and I will agree with the points raised by Dean Ron Mendoza on the dynasty. However, I would also hasten to add that in the context of governance, where there are a number of confluencing factors that shape power, leadership, public administration, governance in general, one is really the structure that we have in the country. And the structure pertains to what does the Constitution say, what do the laws say, what do political suasions have to do with choosing leaders, and that's why we end up with dynastic politics and so on. But there is one thing that over the years and in my readings of political reforms, elections, and people's participation in elections, there is one angle that I think those who want to see reform in election and politics should put really citizens' consciousness, citizens' awareness in the choice of leaders. And I think we cannot leave it to the structural issue. We cannot leave it to the law, especially in the context of the Philippines. The lawmakers are strongly also influential and central to shaping the laws and the implementation of the laws in the bureaucracy. But what I wish to bring in is that, first of all, election is also a competition. It is an open field, no? Even if we put rules, we bind families by rules. At the end of the day, people have the choices, and we should not bind people's choices. I'm saying it's a competition, basically. And therefore, what is crucial is really how we influence, how we shape the decision of voters, how we shape and influence and make them realize that the choice is theirs and that their choice will determine the kind of future that people have. Because that's the nature of an election. It's a competition. It's an open field in a manner of speaking. We may have the rules, bawal ang dynasty, but then as we see over the years, nasa constitution, pero mahirap ipatupad sa batas. Kasi ang gumagawa ng batas, yun mismong may family na political clans and political families. So given that, ang challenge ko dun sa issue na yan ay itapon natin sa mamamayan, sa voters, yung issue. But that is easier said than done because we need to make citizens realize what kind of leadership is needed in the country. So kailangan education, information ng voters, and leave the choices to them. After all, election is a competition. Pero hanggat hindi natatauhan ang ating mamamayan kung ano ang pinipili nila at ano ibig sabihin ng choices nila, we will have the kind of politics and the kind of governance that we have. So sa akin central, Tito Mel, yung gaano katindi, gaano kaseryoso na i-educate natin ang voters at nagkakaroon sila ng tamang pagtitimbang kung sino ang dapat iboto. Sa akin central yon. And even in the theory of governance, more and more participation of citizen is getting into the center table. We may have good structure, we may have good policies, pero takot ang bureaucracy people na ipatupad, so we're on a dead end. We have good bureaucrats, we have good rules, we have good structure, but if the people say, I'd like to cast my vote on candidate A, at the end of the day, that will mean the outcome of the election. So kailangan ilagay natin sa centerpiece ng isang electoral competition ang mamamayan. And this is where I strongly believe participation, information, tamang information ang nakakaabot sa ating kababayan. So sa akin, it doesn't go in conflict with the anti-dynasty advocacy, but I'm saying let's mind citizen decision, citizen participation.
Very well.
And there first.
Yeah. Verhel, good morning and welcome. Nice to see you well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
What are your thoughts about the coming elections, especially with the political dynasties when your choices are limited to almost the familiar family names?
No, in my view, all this goes beyond dynasties. When you have masses of voters wallowing in poverty for generations, when you have a system which we call democracy, so easy to manipulate to serve the purposes of people self-absorbed with power, it's difficult to sort things out. When you have a criminally lopsided distribution of opportunities and resources, it's difficult. That's why, come to think of it, the institutions of democracy never had a chance to become established in this society, because this society, in the first place, was never made conducive to it. You know, when from the beginning you have lopsided distribution of wealth and opportunities, that this is what happens to you, generation after generation after generation. Now, if you say, I can understand that there are people, there are campaigns, there are crusades for the establishment of a true democracy in this part of the world, but we just started on the wrong foot. I mean, the society is on the wrong foot. If you look at if you look at contemporary history, meaning post-war, up to this time, the problem was over-concentration of power, dynasty from the beginning, 46. Dynasty, concentration of power, corruption. You know, every term is a corrupt-ridden term. I mean, how do you, and all these things take away from the prospect of evening things out in society. It's a problem. Of course, we have a geographical disadvantage that allows centralization of power and centralization of wealth and centralization of opportunities. Of course, we all say, once we have educated our masses of voters, how do you begin to educate masses of voters who have been preoccupied with trying to lift themselves from poverty for generations and generations? How do you do that? And education is not simply education. It is not simply teaching math. It is not simply teaching reading. It is not simply teaching history. It is teaching in context, teaching all these subjects, all these philosophies in the context of social life in this part of the world. So it's not it's not so easy. I mean, in fact, the more I think of it, the more I'm humbled by the whole problem. Somebody asked me what I would do. I would choose. Also, from the beginning, we've been told that the process of development proceeds from up down. I mean, trickle down. I mean, how could that have been? How could we have subscribed to that to that philosophy when we very well know that if you controlled wealth and opportunities from the top, you will get nothing but trickles. I mean, development starts from the ground up and starts by expanding outwards, one community linking to another. That's what I think, anyway. So it's very humbling to think of the whole problem.
Okay. Ona, mula sa lente, you never get tired of working para magkaroon ng credible elections. Pero looking at the past, ano ba yung leksyon? Meron ba?
Well, magandang umaga po una sa ating lahat. Sir Melo, it's nice to see you again. It's nice to see colleagues in the election and academic world, Dr. ko, Dean Ron. Salamat po for complimenting us that we never get tired. Kasi ang ano naman po namin, ang lagi pong focus namin in Lente is policy changes or reforms in our policies in our electoral laws. Kasi we want genuine elections, and we see that there's a systematic problem because of political dynasties, because of the type of candidates and politicians, political parties that we have right now in the country. But hindi naman din magbabago eh. So we see that changes in our election laws, in our policies will hopefully be those little steps. So hopefully in the future, meron po tayong may improve in our elections. And just going back to your question, ano yung mga learnings? For the past 3 major automated elections since 2016, we saw how misinformation has played a role in our elections, and how it has changed the narrative, and how it has changed how people look at our elections and how voters appreciate our elections. And isa pong malaking lesson namin dyan, especially with what we saw in 2016 and 2019 elections, is we need to be prepared and we need to be capacitated in addressing this problem, because this problem will not go away and this problem would be bigger in 2022. Why? Kasi wala na po tayong isang major channel na isang source of information for most of the people, for most of our countrymen. So where will they go for information? They will go to online platforms like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and we all know how these online platforms have been gamed or have been manipulated to show a different story to our electorate. So our organizations, different organizations like ASOG, NCPAG, UPNCPAG, PPCRV, NAMFREL, the churches, we usually come together and teach ourselves to fight this problem more and fight this problem more effectively. Kasi hindi po pwede, fake news yan, So without us understanding the algorithm or the formula behind how these online platforms work. So our solution to it will be more effective. So yun po yung isa sa mga malaking learning namin this past 2-3 major elections.
Okay. Pero you will agree with me na yung mga halala natin are based on personality, not on political platforms, right?
Of course, opo. The lack of strong political parties is one of the reasons why we have personality-based politics and elections. And I do agree dun sa nagsalita po earlier when we started this program na that's one of the problems identified talaga and what we want from Congress. Unfortunately, we really have to understand how the congressional calendar works as much as we would want changes in our election laws. Hindi pwedeng ngayon lang yan pinag-uusapan. Kasi if we look at our calendar now, 2 or 3 buwan na lang po yung natitira in the congressional calendar before they file their certificate of candidacy October of next year. So yung po sinasabi natin na anti-dynasty provision, stronger political parties, hindi na po natin yan makikita in time for 2022. And if ever if ever we want to talk about these things again, these reforms in our laws, we really have to start after the 2022 national and local elections. And sana yun yung hingin po natin from our presidential candidates in 2022 that we want to see change in our political structure, the way our political parties are governed and regulated by our COMELEC.
You know, Ona, sa Bicol, pag sinabing napangakuan ka, that's 50% already. Pag nagkatotoo yun, bonus na yun. You must give them 50% for the efforts of promising. Pero meron na akong mga narinig na pangako, hindi naman nangyari. Laging madugo nga. But anyway, tatabi muna natin yung topic na yan. Thank you, Ana, for the opening statement. Jerry, binuksan mo, ikaw yung naglabas noong dagdag bawas noong 1995. Do you see symptoms of that all over again for 2022? Jerry? Teka. Unmute muna natin. Paki-unmute lang muna. Yan. Okay.
Yes, Berhel. Pero magandang umaga. Magandang umaga. Sir Berhel, Mr. Gat, magandang umaga sa lahat. Nadagdagan ko lang yung intro mo, Berhel. Hindi lang naman ako nag-expose nung Hello Garci. Dalawa kami sa Inquirer, tapos meron pang PCIJ, Newsbreak, at saka Vera Files. Okay. In any case, yung dayaan nung nang dagdag bawas, hanggang ngayon naman nandyan. Nung nagsisimula kaming, alam namin ni Nene Pimentel na nananalo siya, pero natalo siya sa bilangan. At nung una, wala kaming clue kung paano namin aatakihin yung kaso niya. Nung na-realize namin sa Tarlac mismo, pilot precinct, isa sa pilot precinct, mas maraming bumoto kaysa dun sa mga rehistrado. Doon nagsimula yung crusade ni Nene Pimentel. Dito rin, nangyari din sa US, may mga allegation na marami ang bumoboto kumpara doon sa numero ng rehistrado. Oo. Pero gusto ko lang banggitin yung mga nabanggit ng unang speaker, yung dynasty ni Ron Mendoza, ang ganda-ganda niya. Ilang beses na niyang binanggit yan sa amin sa ABS, at kasama na rin yung selection of leaders, tamang information ni Edna ko, at saka yung kay Berhel, equal distribution of wealth and opportunities, at saka yung media, yung citizen literacy, at saka media literacy. Siguro kung lalagyan na natin ng detalye, magandang balikan natin yung ating batas at saka yung karanasan natin ng history. yung history ng pandadaya at saka yung batas. Pwede na silang mag-file ng candidacy sa October, pero ang election ay sa Mayo pa. Nung nakaraang election, si Senador, magbabanggit na ako ng pangalan, si Senator ng Cavite, artista, Bautista, nakalimutan ko.
Ibong
Revilla. Hindi pa, nasa kulungan pa siya at hindi pa siya nagde-declare ng candidacy. Dito sa Rizal, ang dami na niyang poster na nakalagay sa puno. Wala nga nakalagay na vote. Pero malinaw. Ang ibig ko sabihin, kung babalikan naman natin yung batas, ay siguro dapat naman yung batas, may capacity si Bong Revilla na maglagay ng polyeto, may pera, may mga taga-takbo. Di pa paano naman yung wala? Na gustong tumakbo at talagang qualified.
Okay.
Diba? Doon sa citizen literacy, siguro idadagdag ko, kasama doon sa selection of leaders, idagdag na natin yung media literacy. Siguro wag nang magpadala ng reporter na magko-cover ng COMELEC ng mga fresh graduate. Yung matatanda na so that they can give context and guidelines. Halimbawa, mayroong isang kandidato dyan, palagi naman siyang na-declare na nuisance candidate, hindi man lang nabibigyan ng background na dapat ito wag nang patagalin pa ng COMELEC. Dapat ng COMELEC wag matakot na makasuhan. I-declare na once and for all immediately. Itong nakaraang election, yung mga party list nasa likod hindi nakita kasi ang haba-haba ng listahan eh. They will do us a favor kung lilig na talagang na-screen na yung mga kandidato. Pipilin na lang tayo kasi ang ABS nagkaroon niya ng 3 debate. Because we have to give another time and another debate for the hindi naman kilala. Na iba yun talaga namang dapat tanggalin na sa listahan. Yung sa mga reporter siguro, halimbawa, yung ang pagtakbo naman talaga is a matter of right. Constitutional, if you're qualified, you can run. Pero may resolution din ng Supreme Court na it's also a privilege. At meron ding COMELEC ruling na you should also have the capacity to mount a nationwide campaign. If election after election you cannot mount a nationwide campaign and that you're a nuisance candidate, strike them out of the list. Pampagulo lang eh. Meron tayo diyang ex-husband ni Chris Aquino. Meron tayong kapangalan kaapelyido ni Frank Chavez, kaapelyido ni Alan Peter, kaapelyido ni Noynoy Aquino, na wala namang intensyong matino kung hindi manggulo lang. Di ba? So yung tamang informasyon, halimbawa, hindi ko alam kung bakit nangyari ito, pero sa history natin, iba yung role ni Johnny Ponce Enrile. Nagkaroon siya ng libro na gustong baguhin yung history. Nung nangangampanya yan sa Ilocos, lahat ng ginawa niya kay Marcos, sinasabi niya. Lahat ng position, niluklok siya ni Marcos, sinasabi niya. But never na binanggit niya yung kanyang role sa EDSA na isa siya sa mga nagpatalsik kay Marcos. Pagdating sa Tarlac, sa bailiwick ng mga Aquino, lahat ng ginawa niya for Aquino, ginawa niya sa EDSA. Never na na-bring out niya yung role niya sa panahon ng martial law. Yung tamang information, siguro ang media, laki ng role dyan eh. Yung media literacy, yung backgrounding ng reporter para pag binibigay mo, limited na nga yung information, limited yung space, limited yung time, ibigay na natin sa tao yung tamang background, who is that candidate and why we should not or we should vote for him. Melo.
Maganda yun Okay. Pero the question remains, personality-oriented pa rin ang eleksyon. Weak political party system. I don't know whether Dean Mendoza would have his thoughts about the kind of political parties that we have. Ano yung pagkakaiba ng mga political parties kung meron man, except for the party list na gustong matanggal doon sa listahan ng mga mababatas. Dean Mendoza, please. Uy, nawala si Dean. Yeah.
Melo, pwede magdagdag.
Yeah. Sige. Nawawala
hindi lang personality, I think. It's patronage, politics. kung meron akong kikitain sa'yo, may mapoprovecho ako, boto kita. Yun ang ating, yun ang ano time set of
Yun ang nangyayari, no? Dean Mendoza, please, your thoughts? Oops. Maybe it's...
Sorry, Melo, I stepped out for a second. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. What about the political parties? Ano ba yung nakikita ninyo? May pagkakaiba yung ideology ng mga political parties? Because it appears that one can just shift from one party to the other as if nagpapalit lang ng pin ng Rotary to Lions Club to Kiwanis. Ano po ba ang inyong pananaw dito?
Yeah, that's one of the main challenges, obviously. Ang situation natin ngayon, meron tayong over 25 deputy speakers and one supermajority party in our government. So clearly, there is no distinction on what kinds of reforms each group of politicians really push for. And it's sending, I think, very confusing signals to our voting population. Kung ano ba talaga, what do you really stand for, right? So I think part of the challenge also is to build serious political parties. And I know si Ona, si Edna, si Sen Nene, and many others advocated for continued political reforms, including a political party reform law that we almost signed actually in the last decade. Pero naudot lang siya. Pero ito sana yung part of the building block.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
For a more stable and well-behaved democracy that we need. Kung meron sanang butterfly, yung palipat-lipat ng partido, tapos meron siguro dapat pondo, yung mga palayang reforma nila. Tapos maganda rin towards parties that share their value, Republican Party or to Democratic Party or to Labor Party or to Green Party or Environmental Party. Doon ako pupunta bilang isang kabataan, tapos matututo ako ng mga reforma nila, ng mga tinutulak nilang advocacy. Tapos posible kung mahusay ako na bata, pwede rin akong maging mapili na pinuno one day ng partido na to. Walang gain nila kung tama yung last name ng bata. Kung kamag-anak ka na makapangyarihan na kasi mas mura yung ikampanya. Kung kilala na yung pangalan mo, meron ka ng 5 kapamilya na naluklok na rin sa pwesto, ikaw na rin yung patatakbuhin. Hindi yung bata na mahusay at matino at meron talagang paniniwala sa reforma. So, ang tanong sa kabataan ngayon na I hope maraming kabataan makinig nitong broadcast mo. Gusto mo bang mabuhay sa isang bansa, name mo? Kung kapamilya mo yung makapiliin yung mga pinuno dahil mas mahusay at matino sila. So yun yung ating reform advocacy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Pero ang isang problema, karamihan daw ng mga kabataan ngayon, parang ayaw pa magrehistro. Ayaw lumahok sa political exercise. Is it because wala na silang tiwala sa sistema natin? Dr. Mendoza, please. Could it be
quick reply lang. Ako naniniwala na maraming kabataan. Yeah. Naniniwala ako na maraming kabataan na gustong makilahok, na gustong makapasok sa political system natin. In fact, yung SK reform law na chinampion ng mga katulad ni Dean Edna at saka ni Attorney Ona and others, meron na ngayong anti-dynasty clause yan, dynasty regulation component. So mas marami ng kabataang magkakaroon ng pagkakataon na maging SK. At yung pag naging SK ka na at napatunayan mo na mahusay ka pala na pinuno, pwede na silang mag-ambisyon na tumaas pa at palanday. Pag sinabi mong politiko ang isang tao, sabi mong politiko, ay, siguro trapo yan, siguro ganyan yan. Hindi, pag isa kang politiko, isa kang tao, isa kang mamamayan na nagsisilbi sa kapwa niya mamamayan at gusto mong magkasama-sama tayo para maitupad yung ating mga development objectives. Yan ang goal ng mga politician dapat. So I hope yung mga bata ngayon nagko-consider na magkaroon ng political career, political future, hindi lang yung mga batang mayaman at batang tama yung last name, kundi yung mga bata na gusto talaga, nagnanasa talaga na baguhin yung pamamalakad ng ating bansa. So ako naniniwala na maraming bata na pagka binigyan mo ng pagkakataon, magsisilbi sila ng mahusay, kailangan gisingin natin yung maraming mga bata, kailangan hindi sila ma-discourage. Kasi kung ang tingin nila, puro dynasty na lang ang mananalo, puro dynasty rin ang may pera, talagang madi-discourage yung iba dyan sa mga yan. So yun dapat yung ating...
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Edna Ko, isa pala kayo sa prime mover kaya nagkaroon ng reforma sa SK. Pero ang problema kasi, doon sa SK election, kumalat na rin yung pera. Bibilhin ko lang yung boto, panalo na ako. At pag may pera ako yung SK na uupo sa sanggunian. How do you feel about that?
Ako kasi, Tito Mel, I always believe na yung political party electoral reforms, ano yan hindi dapat pagsawaan, no? Kahit may mga ganong insidente na kung saan we have those, sabihin natin, negative experiences and cases, reform is always a continuing task. It's a continuing challenge. So, nag-agree ako dun sa unang sinabi nila, Dean Ron, may mga kabataan na nadidismaya. Meron ding sumusunod sa yapak ng mga, sabi natin, trapo ng political clans, magiging dynasty. Pero at the end of the day, ang dami pang section ng kabataan na hopeful, promising, at may mga magagandang example na kung saan nagpapakita ng bagong practices. And the other thing I think is some people see this kasi iba ang lengguwahe ngayon ng kabataan. And therefore probably we have to reach out to young people, and if you listen to many of them closely, ang daming reason kung bakit hopeful tayo na pwedeng magbago. Ang problema lang natin sa Pilipinas, napaka-slow ng ating changes na nakikita. And therefore, we have to stretch a little bit of that persistence, stubbornness for reform, the patience, kailangan andun tayo. We've been through so many electoral and political reform campaigns. Pera at politika, party reforms, party list, anong ambag niya. Tiningnan natin ito. We pushed for the creation of yung campaign finance unit inside the Commission on Election as a result of our pera at politika campaign na money must not matter, but they should be accountable, yung fair at level playing field ang practices. Lahat ito, ang hirap ng dinaanan ng katulad namin na nagtutulak ng ilang pagbabago, pero napakaliit ng mga changes na parang nakikita natin. But nevertheless, unless we are dead, we continue to pursue this reform. So sa akin, I don't give up, and we continue to contaminate the young people by saying, go on, challenge that setup. But also, hindi ako nawawalan ng pag-asa kasi in the last 2019 election, we made a strong punch against political clans, right? We can identify local government units na tumaob yung ilang clan at may panibagong leadership na nabuo. For example, Pasig, napaka-ambisyosong leader, nasa right direction, nakikita natin, and people are watching him closely. May pag-asa ba to? Magtutuloy-tuloy ba ito? I think we should kind of invest hope in that kind of change and bigyan natin ng patuloy na support. So sa akin, Although, oo nga, I agree with Verhel. Ano ba to? Napaka-systemic ng problema. But you know, we are born into this system and we are the active agents and ingredients kung paano we swim into this mal system that we are into. So sa akin, sige lang, punch lang. Wherever we can go and create some mileage, let's go. But the young people, ang laki-laki ng ating botante na young people, let's go and mind them. Never mind yung mga trapo na mukhang hindi na nga yan talaga. Magkakaroon ng ilang radical positive changes. But we have to live with them. But we should continue not to give up. Sa akin, sige lang, we walk the long miles. And as I said, unless surrender na tayo, patay na tayo, then we can't do anything. But I think people like us who have aged in the reform efforts, I didn't realize, Ona was my student, I didn't realize people like me, older than her, continue to inspire, We continue to inspire those who come after us. We continue to inspire media people. Hindi naman lahat ng media people pay envelopes yan, right? So, I think may pag-asa hanggat ang bagal lang talaga ng Pilipinas in more ways than one. We see very ang bagal, And but there are some colorful changes that we can see. So hindi naman siya 100% failure. Pero it all the more challenges our persistence. Yun lang, Tito Mel.
Sir Mel, unmute. Unmute. Sir Melo, unmute po.
Yeah. Verhel, I was asking, you've seen difference between them, among them, dahilan sa mukhang maraming mga sa ROI, sa return on investment. Then we've seen mga mukha na kung saan-saan sa Pilipinas and will make you think, teka muna, magkano gastos nito mga taong ito? Berel.
Sinasabi ba, eleksyon? Magkano kikitain after that? Election talaga, business yan No? Pagka ikaw, nag-invest ka ng ganun kalaki sa eleksyon, ang reasonable suspicion, may kikitain kang mas malaki ron. Ngayon yung sinasabi ni Edna, alam mo, sinasabi ni Edna na she hinted at focusing campaigns for reform on local struggles. Ako nakikita ko rin yun I see more hope in local reforms, leadership reforms. Nakikita ko rin yun. Kukunti nga lang, Pero ako naniniwala ako, yung reform, the credibility of any campaign for reform could only gain from learned lessons. Yung kampanya mo for reform, hindi magtutuloy yan kung ang lahat ng leksyon na nakaraan hindi mo natutuhan. The most spectacular lesson, hindi natin natutuhan Di ba? Yung sabi kay Garci, hello Garci, the most spectacular lesson about cheating in elections. Hindi natin natutuhan. It was caught on tape. The president herself said sorry, suggesting, admitting the wrongdoing. And you know what happened there, Melo? Our present national security advisor was sent to the south to enforce the bidding of this president. So he uprooted the entire contingent of the military there to enforce the bidding of the cheating president. Wala tayong natutuhan, Melo, hanggang ngayon Can you imagine kung that particular case was dealt by law? Malaki ang matutuhan natin. Ang sa akin karamihan kasi, hindi natutuhan yung leksyon. That's why we elected Erap Estrada twice. That's why we have Duterte today. Unlearned lessons yan Ang para sa akin talaga yung campaign for reform will not gain substantially, kaya mabagal Sabi nga ni Edna, mabagal Kasi hindi natin natutuhan yung leksyon ng nakaraan. No? Pagka ganun tayo ng ganun, wala talagang mangyayari. Ngayon ganito na naman Can you imagine this late? In the national campaign for electoral reform, hinalal pa natin si Duterte. How can you explain that? That by itself is proof of our inability to learn the lessons of history. Yun ang problema natin. But also, wala tayong magawa nga. Sabi niya, forced to good tayo Kaya ilalaban mo lang ng ilalaban. Ang sa akin naman, kung ilalaban mo rin lang, mamili ka ng battleground. Kasi pagka ang tingin mo, ilalabanan mo na lang lahat, talagang hindi naman po pwede. So let's have some, let's win some battles. I think ganun talaga ang mangyayari sa atin Pero yung reform, credibility ng reform, wala yan. Walang maniniwala dyan pagka yung lahat ng mahihirap, election after election, notwithstanding all these promises, generation after generation after generation, these masses of the poor are unable to even feel a certain lift from iniquities and poverty. Hanggat wala yan
Okay.
So kailangan maramdaman nila yan.
All right. I'd like to pose this question to everyone, pero si Dean Mendoza will have to leave at 10 o'clock. Siguro, una ka munang sumagot, Dean Mendoza. Ang tanong mula sa kasama kong nasa FOCAP sa Kyoto, si Alden Monzon, what are your thoughts on the prospect of the Philippines adopting a mail-in ballot system to adapt to the current pandemic? Many are questioning the validity of the elections in the U.S.
Mel
Sir
is
Melo,
muted.
you're on mute. Unmute.
LDT all over again. Dean Mendoza, your thoughts about mail-in ballots?
Yeah. First, thank you again for the chance to weigh in. I just wanted to react quickly to a point raised earlier, and then I'll react to mail-in ballots. Right.
Okay.
The first, I think it's a very deep discussion what we're having in terms of Dean Edna's iterative approach to reforms, bit by bit, we're moving forward, versus si Sir Verhel, what I thought I heard is parang hindi natin nakikita na nagme-make an impact sa ating kababayan, so maraming nadi-discourage, right? And there's a lot of literature right now na kaya nga nagkaka-populism ang mga bansa kasi hindi nila nakikita na substantive enough yung pag-unlad at naiiwan yung ibang mga grupo. Pag nangyari yan, tutulak sila para sa isang tao na hindi necessarily establishment para baguhin niya yung sistema. And I think from a reform perspective, it's the difference between a big bang reform and a 3 steps forward, 2 steps backward type of approach to reform, right? So ang tanong ngayon sa atin, nakukumbinsi pa ba yung ating mga kababayan sa 3 steps forward, 2 steps backward, right? O naiinip na sila. Palagay ko yan yung temperature check na kailangan nating malaman pag kinausap natin ang mga kababayan natin. And ang naging sagot, at least in a few previous elections, is it seems, at least according to this interpretation of history, not just in the Philippines but in other countries, naiinip yung maraming mga tao na napag-iwanan, including ng globalization, right? So yung populists, umaangat sila dahil nga hindi sila nakasama yung mga population. Sumusuporta ngayon sila sa mga katulad ni Donald Trump. Sumusuporta ngayon sila sa katulad ni Bolsonaro. Sumusuporta sila sa katulad ni President Duterte, right? At si President Duterte naman, nakita niya yung advocacy ni Sen Nene, yung federalism, medyo may pagka-Big Bang type of reform naman yon, right? Babaguhin yung constitution, babaguhin yung structures natin. Dean Edna talked about our structures which are not necessarily conducive to better policy making and faster progress, right? So I think there's no answer to that right now. I think we're going to have to answer it again in 2022 from an individual voter level. Okay ba sa'yo yung unti-unting reforma, building institutions bit by bit, or do you want to go on a complete overhaul of the democracy? I think that could be one of the ways that we could frame the present discourse. So I go back to your question of one of your colleagues in FOCAP. What are the prospects for mail-in ballots? I think there's a lot of good work being done now, including by groups like Lente and NAMFREL, to advance our understanding of what needs to be done to prepare for the 2022 elections. I think klaro na hindi aabot yung vaccines sa vast majority of Filipinos by the time we hold our elections in May of 2022. I think it's a safe assumption to make right now. So, kung ganyan ang situation, we need to start preparing for the May 2022 elections, and we need to consider the cost benefit of different types of strategies to basically give our fellow Filipinos a chance to vote and really to ensure that they are not disenfranchised during this particular process. So yung mail-in ballots is just one of several proposals that have been put forward. Ang sagot ko lang quickly dyan, what are the prospects of mail-in ballots? Each of the options will require an understanding of our capability to execute the strategy. So kung yung institution na matatask to implement it is quite weak or hindi pa masyadong malakas, hindi siya masyadong well-managed, then it will be challenging, right? So I think we should consider the options that link to already stronger institutions and management para hindi siya magkaroon ng problema when we roll out the reform. So I think si Attorney Ona might actually weigh in on some of those options for preparing for the 2022 elections, and I think we should start as soon as we can.
Pero Dean Mendoza, you're about to leave. Ano yung prospects na nakikita mo for the coming elections sa 2022? Ano yung preparations na dapat paghandaan talaga para matiyak na kapani-paniwala yung eleksyon at yung mga cartoon characters hindi na mahalal into high office, things like that?
I think our COMELEC is already hard at work preparing for 2022. They have a budget. It's not as large as what they want. I think we should support them to get more resources to do a more adequate job preparing for 2022. What are the options that we are considering? Actually, may paper sila Attorney Ona dyan on what options, what technologies are possible to prepare for 2022. Pero ang tingin ko dyan, we should consider under a pandemic situation, restructuring the way we concentrate our polling places. I think this is one of the options that are now being weighed in. We should consider those who will require special help, such as the elderly, such as those who may actually be sick of COVID. Kailangan pa rin nilang bumoto, by the way. So kailangan meron tayong basically a master plan, a comprehensive plan to ensure that very few or zero Filipinos will be disenfranchised because of the pandemic. So it's a huge task, and I think it will require an investment in our COMELEC and in our citizens' participation to strengthen that particular process. I think it will also require the strong buy-in of many of our politicians and political parties, such as they are. They need to support this so that we can protect our citizens during the campaign when the politicians are campaigning, and during the election day, and also after the election day, so that we will have sort of a fair and stable environment to conduct it. I think many of these things will need to be worked out in another conversation where you will have more of the details. But certainly, there are very practical ways done by other countries already. South Korea had elections, Singapore had elections, the United States had elections. Even some middle-income Latin American countries had elections. So hindi yan about being rich and being able to afford it. Lahat ng bansa na magkakaroon ng eleksyon, kaya nilang gawin yan within their means. Kailangan lang pagplanuhan at paghandaan.
Okay. Pero isang tanong na ka mag-exit, ano? Gaano kalaki yung halaga ng endorsement ng isang sitting president sa isang kandidato na maaring umali sa kanya?
That's the question. I think each sitting president has tried to make the endorsement matter since I think since the dictator at least. But I don't know of any of them that have really succeeded in transferring that popularity and transferring that endorsement into votes for the next president. And Dean Edna can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think the general pattern is you cannot transfer it. So the next president will need to make an altogether new case in order to be selected. And this actually is part of what makes the policy reform environment a little unstable. Kasi hindi mo ma-continue yung inumpisahan nung una. On the other hand, that is what you can say for a good president. For a bad president, I think it's also a blessing kasi you are ensured na madi-discontinue yung mga masamang ginagawa niya because of the new leader. So it's sort of a blessing and a curse, if you ask me.
Okay. Yung susceptibility ng may, ano nakita mo? Susceptibility ng mail-in ballots to fraud? Will it be susceptible considering our setup in the Philippines?
Sir Melo, are you still asking me?
Yes. Patanong lang kasi.
I defer to Attorney Ona. I think she's more of an expert there on that particular question. My sense is that what we need to work for is a very credible election because the 2022 elections will be very, very critical. There are a lot of accountability issues that we need to consider for this particular election. There are a lot of questions on the democracy and how we understand it and where we want to take it as a country. In terms of our defense partnerships, in terms of our commitment to sustainability, in terms of our commitment to anti-corruption, maraming kailangan pag-isipan kung itutuloy ba natin itong nangyari in the past 5 years or babaguhin ba ulit natin at sa anong paraan natin kailangang i-improve if we need to improve. So I think the elections, because of so many issues, not to mention the pandemic and COVID-19 and the global economic slowdown, there are so many things that need to be considered and a lot riding on getting that election right by our country and also getting a credible election result.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you very much, Dean Mendoza, for your time with us. Merry Christmas too. Thank you again. Dr. Ectaco, your thoughts about mail-in ballots, please?
Actually,
is it possible for us to have it?
well, I am not very sure whether a mail-in ballot would be a good way to explore participation in the election. Meron kasing may very character yung ating system ng bureaucracy. Kung paano, ano ang capability ng ating bureaucracy, ng ating system, ng management ng election, kung paano ito mag-work effectively, or will this be another occasion for corrupting, no, or yung maka-intervene dun sa decision talaga ng people's votes and choices. So I mean, it's because the mail-in approach has to do with ano yung system ng delivery, ano yung means ng sending. At the moment, technologically, we are not very strong on that. So paano yung mail-in system magiging mai-ensure yung efficiency niya? So I am really half-hearted on the mail-in system, as it is discussing in the congressional hearings that there should always be options for people, that we cannot rely on technology, electronic system alone. Kasi meron tayong access divide. Maraming lugar, maraming sections ng country who do not have very good connection. Even if you have laptops, computers, pero ang weak ng ating connectivity, so that may hamper that. Therefore, dapat yung ang sinasabi namin, pag-isipan pa rin yung combination of different approaches. Of course, mail-in is one. Pero ang sa akin lang, how will we be assured, no, na yung ating election manager, like the COMELEC, would have a strong, reliable plan to carry it out, na walang hijacking, walang intervention, and so on. So I think that's my hesitation, and certainly dapat patuloy na kino-consider yung iba-ibang option, including, for example, extending voting dates to more than 1 day because of the condition of the pandemic. And I think there are some people in COMELEC and also in Congress who are already convinced about really holding election beyond 1 whole day. For the reason that right now, meron tayong isang krisis na hinaharap, which can prevent or derail election occurrence. At ayaw nating mangyari yon, no? So I think we are exploring different options. I'm saying I'm not really close to the idea of mail-in, pero anong assurance that it will really be effectively carried out? We have to do some planning, and we have to do some siguro testing, and I don't know. It has to be really considered seriously. The use of other places as polling station, as registration stations, lalo ngayon ang daming gymnasium, university facilities na unused. We can offer them, probably consider them as options for voting places. Kasi ang isang kinakaharap ng botante ngayon, the fear, yung safety under a pandemic. So takot magrehistro, takot lumabas, pero dapat kasi meron kang magandang options that will really offer that.
Yeah. Thank you. Verhel, your thoughts, please?
Alam mo, my greater fear is something else.
Ano
It's
kaya
not that, no? Well, if you hold an election in a militarized bureaucracy, when you hold an election with an anti-terrorism law hanging above the heads of everybody, when you hold an election in an environment where anyone who disagrees with this government may be labeled red, that's our trouble. Hindi yung system Ang problema is the fear that is struck among the electorate by this government, which should continue. Ang tingin ko kasi, Melo, plano ito eh. Militarize yung bureaucracy mo. Ang nagpapatakbo sa iyo ay mga general o dating general. Yung armed forces and police beholden doon sa presidente mo na may sariling agenda. Anong agenda niya? Dahil hindi siya po pwedeng tumakbo uli, kailangan yung successor niya kanya. Kung hindi, maaaring masabit siya sa mga krimen na nangyari sa rehimen niya. Tapos meron kang anti-terrorism law. A law that is unable to define the very crime that it punishes. In fact, defined so abstractly that anyone, even slightly suspected, could be picked up under that law. Pagkatapos lahat ng anyone who stands to the left of this regime is labeled communist. Iyon ang aking kinatatakutan, Melo. Hindi yung mga technicalities that I would suppose kung talagang aayusin mo, pwede mo namang ayusin. Ito ang kinatatakot ko. Paano ka magkakaroon ng, how can you have free elections in this climate of fear? Iyon ang akin eh. So, actually, para sa akin, mas malaking problema yun ngayon kasi nakikita mo na eh, bakit ba nag-umpisa ito ngayon? Bakit late in the term of this president, all these things are happening? So, meaning it's reasonable enough to suspect that the idea is to strike fear among the electorate so that this militarized central government can do as it pleases. Yun ang kinatatakot ko.
Okay. Thank you, Berhel. Attorney Ona, you're a lawyer. Meron pa bang paggalang sa batas na nagaganap ngayon?
Sa ngayon, sir, the rule of law is under attack. That's a statement that I could make right now. But a lot of lawyers still in the legal profession, a lot of us are still following and are still advocating for that. But unfortunately, these past few years, it has been under attack, and madami pa naman po fighting for it, for rule of law, and we kailangan lang tuloy-tuloy yung paglaban at pag-stand for it kasi that's our profession eh. That's what our profession stands for, and if we don't fight for it, then the whole profession will just be reduced to nothing. Sir, gusto ko lang sagutin yung sa mail-in voting.
You've seen... Yes, please.
Yung sa mail-in voting kasi legally under our election laws, it's not allowed in the Philippines, but it is allowed for our overseas voters. That's one of the modes for our overseas voters. But going by the experience sa mail-in, yung papalit-palit na address ng mga botante natin, mga overseas voters. So yung mga embassies natin, they send out the ballot packets to the addresses of our overseas voters. Malaking percentage bumabalik sa embassy because of maling address or wala na si voter dun sa pinadalhan na address ng embassy. Will be applied in the Philippines also. At marami rin naman tayong mga kababayan, especially those who don't have permanent homes or who are just resting or who are migrants sa papalit-palit na address. Baka yun yung magiging problem natin for mail-in voting. Aside dun sa infrastructure in place natin, as much as we would like to believe that in the infrastructure of our mail, right now, hindi pa siya ganun kaganda and hindi pa siya ganun in place. And if ever we'll be resorting to mail-in voting, that should be fixed first, our mail system. In the Supreme Court, it's already allowed na you file petitions, you file cases using private couriers. So if ever we'll be exploring mail-in voting, that should be one of the options to explore also engaging private couriers, not only our public couriers or yung PhilPost kasi nga po meron talagang backlog in our public mail system. So yun. Just to yun sa ano lang po yung sa kabataan, I also believe na we should not give up hope. Going by what Dr. Ko said, my former teacher in Pasay in Ateneo, slow and steady wins the race. And the SK reform law was just passed 2016, and we had our first SK elections in 2018. So itong mga bata po na to, mga bata pa talaga at baguhan. And we really have to focus on them kasi we've been talking to some of these SK officials. Ang problema po, they're also starting talking to the barangay captains, to the old guards in our elections and in our political structure. At ang hirap po niyan, when you talk to the old guards, they will learn the old tricks of these old guards, ng mga kabataan natin. So kailangan, ngayon pa lang, mag-intervene na tayo. Groups like us should intervene and touch base with this young politicians. Kasi ito talaga yung future natin eh. If we don't have a political party reform law in the future because that's really hard to pass, then we invest in the SK. Kasi 5-10 years from now, they could be running for LGU or higher position. So ako po talaga naniniwala na slow and steady wins the race.
Ona, why is it that it appears yung mga may reform orientation sila pero mangilan-ngilan lang sila dahilan sa yung mga traditional politicians pa rin ang napupwesto. What's your brief answer to that?
Ako lagi ko sinasabi, sir, we should give the SK a chance because it has just been implemented. 2 taon pa lang po, halos 2 taon pa lang tumatakbo yung SK. And yung thinking po na it could be run or it could be dominated or controlled by traditional politicians. Hopefully, with the anti-dynasty provision in place with the SK reform law, mas magkakaroon po ng space or opportunities for young bloods or those not affiliated to the traditional families or political dynasties to have to run in our elections and to be part of our government.
Okay. Jerry, anong pananaw mo sa mail-in votes? Pwede ba yon sa Pilipinas, sa setup ngayon?
Pwede naman. Kaya lang meron din akong napakalaking reservation dyan. Pero bago yan, gusto ko muna mag-comment doon sa sinabi ni Sir Berhel. I agree with Berhel. And if that climate of fear persists until next year, by silencing or arresting the very people who want to challenge this climate of fear or this administration, that 91% of popularity, which so many people have said was a result of this climate of fear, we have to fear the next election. Doon sa mail system, napaka-vulnerable ng Pilipinas pag ganyan. Napaka-vulnerable. Yung resulta lang sa overseas, participation and accuracy, at saka yung smuggling. Pero kung sakaling mapupunta tayo doon, kailangan ng talagang malaking preparation, assuming may budget. Dapat yung master list ng COMELEC ay maayos talaga. Tapos yung COMELEC sa regional and local LGU offices dapat malakas din dahil sila mag-i-implement. Hindi, I would prefer that we do not only extend the voting days, but we also expand the coverage of the advanced voting and should be presided, administered by, not by the police or the military, but by strong COMELEC people, independent of influence sa local. I hope. Pero napaka-vulnerable natin dyan.
Berhel, balikan ko yung climate of fear. Ano yung nakikita mo? Pag mayroong ganitong sitwasyon, matatakot ang tao so magpiprevail yung gusto ng administrasyon? Ganun ba yun?
Nakikita naman natin, nagpiprevail Pag tiningnan, tama yung sabi ni Jerry tingnan mo lang ang survey isang tingin mo lang na survey survey ng mga natakot yun Di ba? Saan ka maniniwala ka ba na mahigit sa 9 sa 10 Pilipino gusto ang nangyayari sa bayan? Sige nga, reasonable ba yon? So takot lang yon. Bakit? Yung mismong survey, pag ginawa mo, marami nakakaalam kung ano yung survey, sino ang sinasurvey, sino ang mga kalahok dyan. So siyempre matatakot. Lalo na eleksyon.
Yes.
Ang eleksyon that point by Jerry na kung sino pa yung pumuprotesta sa mga kaganapan ngayon, yung pa ang tatakutin. Paano na ngayon makakakampanya yon? Against the ruling regime or against the choices of the ruling regime. Paano pa kampanya yon? Di talong-talo na. So kaya nga ang sinasabi ko is pagka talaga hindi mo natutunan, if I may go back to my thesis na reform, any campaign for reform will make reasonable gains only if lessons from the past have been learned. Pag hindi, wala talagang mangyayari election lang tayo ng election Ang klase ng demokrasya natin kasi, Melo, is so easy to manipulate. Kasi mahaba na ang practice ng mga dynastic and gang leaders gang political leaders They've had so much practice that they could napakagaling na nila So, madaling manipulate yung sistema. Yan ang problema. Kaya kung ako tatanungin mo, ako, if you ask me, mamili ako talaga ng the battles to fight Kasi yung malaki, at saka yung pagka lumabang ka rin sa malaki, napakalaki ng ng battleground. Isa dyan sa malaking battleground, cyberspace. Yung mga yun, talong-talo ka sa cyberspace yung mga yun Puro bayad yun They have, not only do they have their own armed forces, they have their troll forces too. Kaya mahirap labanan.
Okay. So parang sinasabi natin, tagilid ang darating na halalan kung magpapatuloy ang ganitong sistema.
Yes.
Siyempre. Talagang tagilid. Tapos yung pandemic pa, this pandemic plays so well into the plots of the current regime So isa pa yun na swertihan talaga Kung gagawin natin. Pero sabi nga niyan, hindi pwedeng hindi mo labanan.
All right. To close our discussions today, Professor Ed Nacto, ano yung Christmas wish mo go on until 2022? Sabay ka na diretso
Well, sa akin ang wish ko, well, generally it's still pagdating sa election, hindi lang yung Christmas wish na, because I think I cannot wish for anything more, but ang para sa bayan, para sa society natin, para sa election, sana ang kababayan natin mas magkaroon pa ng one level higher sa pagsusuri what the election means, ano talaga ba ito? And I think it is also about how do we face up, dahil ang daming nakabalot na condition yung election. Number one nga yung pandemic Ang dali-daling ma-threaten talaga ng election, ng ating democratic exercise under a pandemic. That's why ang daming matatakot not to mention the climate of fear na binanggit na. Pero sa akin, more than the political fear, it is also the safety, the health, the well-being of people. At ito ay idinudulot ng pandemic. But unless this is, I don't think we are doing well dealing with the pandemic. So baka din isang condition ito, no, para yung mga tao magdesisyon. Like during the time of Pinoy, Mama Sapano was a blow to the endorsement of his candidate. I think at this point, this administration, outside of that fear factor na sinasabi ng ating mga kasama dito, ang isang determining moment at matatandaan ng kababayan natin, how well did we perform under a condition of pandemic? Kasi ang trademark natin at this point, close to the election, anong performance ng ginawa natin ng administration na to on the pandemic? On the create, on the bayanihan to, ang daming problema. On securing safety of yung health workers, yung bayad sa health workers, yung ang dami. And I think this will be shaping also the kind of decision that people will carry through. No? Do we want an unresolved case and problem na hinaharap kagaya ng pandemic? What happened to the big budget na hindi gumagalaw, na para sa health facilities, para sa payments sa health workers? Lahat ito nasa talking point lagi. Pero I think may impact itong pandemic na dadalhin ng mga tao hanggang dun sa point. Ito yung something that they will remember and associate with the administration. Andun yung fear, andun yung intervention ng trolls, pero parang tinatanggap sadly, tinatanggap ng tao, pero itong safety nila under a pandemic, they will carry this. So I would think it is better that the administration does not endorse its candidate, because it may even it may even do harm for that endorsement than good if we don't do well on this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Ona from Lente. Yes, Ona?
Ako, sir, ang wish ko is for organizations and individuals who will take part in the 2022 national elections to do something different. Kasi pare-parehas na po lagi yung ginagawa ng mga grupo at ng mga individual. Voters education, voter registration type. But I think it's high time, and we're all in agreement that 2022 is a very important election in our country, and we have to do something different to make that election to make that elections more meaningful for us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Jerry?
Isa lang ang wish ko. Divine intervention.
Okay. Pero may wish ako para sa'yo. Makabalik ka sa mainstream at makapagtrabaho ng mas maganda at mas maayos. Berhel?
Desperate yung kay Jerry, Oh. Desperate talaga yung kay Jerry. I am inclined to share his desperation. Anyway, what we will require to be able to somehow get out of this situation is an understanding of where we are today. Grabe, Melo, kung nasaan tayo ngayon, no? We are in a rut politically and economically. No? I don't know whether, notwithstanding an elephantine proof that we are in this kind of situation, people will be able to gather or to muster the courage to vote the next time around their proper consciences. Yun lang ang tinitingnan ko Kasi kailangan natin melong a great deal of courage and a proper understanding of where we are today and where we might be going if we made the wrong decision. Yun lang.
Okay. Andiyan pa kaya si Attorney Getz? Attorney Getz, please. Hello? Palagay ko wala. Ariel, your thoughts, closing remarks na tayo, your Christmas wish, or on behalf. Yeah, Getz is already with us. Your Christmas wish, Getz, please.
Ayan na siya, ayan na siya.
Your Christmas wish.
Attorney Guts, are you there? Okay.
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm still here, but it was the whole time Tagalog. Was not sure if it's me. My Christmas wish, I think everybody have got the same Christmas wish, that it will be a much better year 2021, that we can meet in person, that we can chat, we can have a good time together. And from my side, for this activity today, of course, I didn't understand much, but some words I can hear the whole time. And I'm here in the Philippines now for 5 years. And honestly, as a German, there's one thing that I don't understand. This is these famous political dynasties. For 5 years now, everybody is complaining about political dynasties, but they are still there. So this is for me as a foreigner, it's a little bit strange and hard to understand. But I will continue to give my best to understand it maybe one day. Having said that, yes, thank you very much, PPI. Thank you very much to everyone. I wish you all a Merry Christmas, and let's hope that next year Christmas we can all be together and have a big party. Thank you.
Thank you. Ariel?
Perfect. Maraming salamat sa lahat ng dumalo at nanood. Pero meron sana akong tanong din kay Mr. Santos at kay Jerry. I share the desperation of both. Pero ano po ang kailangan, Mr. Santos, sir, and Jerry, ano ang kailangan gawin ng media practitioners, ng journalists at this point? It's going to be a huge challenge for all of us, but more so sa part ng mga journalists and media practitioners.
Okay. Pagka media
Yeah, okay. Gabriel.
Sige, Jerry.
Ako yung sa newsroom, siguro yung magpapadala tayo ng mga taong nagko-cover ng COMELEC at saka ng political parties this early, this should have begun long ago. Ilagay na natin yung mga matitino at marurunong, huwag na yung mga bata na hindi man lang makapagbigay ng background kung sino yung mga kandidatong pasaway. Dapat tapos na yun. Kasi kailangan natin
experienceado na may experience na.
Kasi kailangan talaga natin ng information at saka education. Kukunti yung space, kukunti yung time. Let's give the best. Hindi na yung hindi tayo nakakapagbigay ng tamang information sa gitna ng pandemic at saka fake news. Dapat matino, mahusay na pagbabalita talaga. Yun ang masasabi ko para sa isang reporter na katulad ko. Sir Berel, mas
Yeah,
Yes,
if journalists today at this stage don't yet know what to do, they should get out of the profession. They should understand that what we have today is not simply a health pandemic. Yes, the health pandemic is a simple, inopportune occasion. What we have today is a socio-political pandemic. We've been having that for a long time. And if journalists still don't know what to do in the face of that pandemic, I don't know what hope yet we can have.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let
Nawala ang connection ni Sir Melo.
I'd like to say thank you to everyone who made it possible. I can only wish we will have a better year ahead, a more peaceful Christmas, and connection so that we can go on with
Oo nga, bad connection tayo ngayon.
Thank you.
Kuya Melo.
Oh,
Grabe.
this is the worst connection we have.
Yeah, putol-putol.
My friends at LDT smart, that they should be smarter
Oo.
this time. Anyway, thank you very much. God bless
Thank
us all.
you.
Next
Thank
time.
you. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po. Maligayang Pasko.
Ito ang Oragon Internet Television. Maaasahan sa Balance News in Public Affairs, Education, Music and Information gamit ang mga bagong teknolohiya sa pamamahayag. Maaasahan sa katotohanan, kaagapay ng mamamayan sa pagkikipag-ugnayan sa pamahalaan. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now conclude another day of broadcasting activities. You have been watching to this virtual broadcast station, Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting, a commercial non-stop virtual broadcast station through Facebook and YouTube. Registered with business name number 1909782 by the Department of Trade and Industry, and authorizing to operate until July 2, 2025. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting is now signing off.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, helas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y bumay. Lupang bihirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa manluluping, di ka pasisigil, sa nagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit ko